Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here and be on the same stage as James here. Risk is obviously a big part of farming, and I believe that being a good farmer is actually about being a good risk manager. My side is slightly less physical than James is, but we're talking about the profitability of family farms and the impact of volatility. So when we're looking about risk, actually, it's pretty easy to spot a risk taker, a gambler, if you will. They're everywhere. But of course, taking a risk can feel fantastic. It's quite exciting. It can make you feel alive. But often, it can end extremely badly. Pausing to take a selfie with this bull was a terrible idea, as it turned out. And the next 1 minute, I didn't want to share with you. But as farmers, we're obviously a little bit more subtle about the risks that we take. There's feed wheat prices over on the right-hand side. I'd suggest that buying that shiny tractor was pretty risky, looking at prices like that. And it's not just arable. Livestock farmers, that hat's slightly risky. But can he tell you, after all of this hard work, what his lamb price is going to be worth next year? And of course, we know about dairy. When I was doing my scholarship, 2016, the volatility is extraordinary. The damage that it's done to our dairy industry is extraordinary. And I'd suggest that investing in the future is a pretty risky game right now. So we've got Ben here from the Farmer's Guardian. This image here encapsulates why I'm so passionate about doing something about it. These are two consecutive front page headlines. On the left, we had 1 week, dairy price surging. Fantastic. The next week, we saw a plummet in wheat prices. It's such a depressing cycle that we do have to try and break out of. Because, of course, the farmers that I met on my travels were fantastic at managing production risk. What I'm suggesting is we need to get much better with the right tools to manage price risk. But when you're doing this, you have to focus on the reality of farmers. And of course, when you're building a solution, it needs to be for farmers rather than financiers. Because farmers need help in all sectors. It needs to be affordable, it needs to be simple, and there needs to be low risk. So, we've got two options. I wedged myself into some aeroplane seats and went to find out about risk management. And of course, option one here is exchanges. Chicago, we all know about Chicago, it's a great place. And they've got futures, they've had them since 1848. 150 years of a simple risk transfer from farmers to speculators. But fast forward 150 years, and everything's changed. To my mind, the roots of futures has been forgotten, and that simple heritage of helping farmers manage volatility has been lost. So the reality of a Bloomberg screen, it's high cost. You're talking a large amount of money to get in. It's very risky. Margin calls. Trying to explain a margin call where you can lose more than you're trying to protect to a European farmer feels like a long-term project. It's limited to arable, and actually the reality is if you go phone up a broker in London, they will not pick up the phone to you unless you have 400 hectares. Now in Europe, that's less than 3%. Globally, that's less than 1%. So I believe that futures is the wrong product for the wrong audience, and we can do much more in other areas. Hedging. God, it's a boring term. On my travels, it was fascinating to go talk to a combination of city financiers and agriculture. These guys on the top, I was lucky enough to spend some time with. They get hedging inside out and back to front. Chris Minodi, hedge fund manager, Peter Hambro, and Graham Birch over there ran a $40 billion BlackRock. They could not understand why farmers don't do more to hedge their risk. And of course, my answer to them was, go spend a day in a modern combine and see how you get on. These are two different worlds that find it difficult to understand each other. But when I admitted that I found it difficult to understand it, actually we got slightly more honest responses. I talked to big processors, politicians, and of course, hundreds of farmers. And I can count on one hand how many people truly understood hedging and this ability of managing risk. So, we've got a slight issue with exchanges, perhaps insurance is another way of handling it. And historically, the relationship between insurance and derivatives, futures if you like, and perhaps gambling if you wanted to call it that, is pretty close. In Edward Lloyd's coffee shop in the 17th century, you could go in there and bet that your own ship wouldn't return home. And of course, it's a hedge. You buy life insurance, you're betting that you're going to stay alive slightly less than the insurer. So this is an interesting grey area. But there are good things about insurance. It's not wildly interesting, I'll give you that. But at least you get a fixed price for the risk that you're taking. To transfer that risk, we all understand it. We do it every single day. And of course, the maximum you can lose is the premium that you pay. So it was time to go find out some more. When I started my Nuffield travels, one of the biggest excitements was the opportunity to travel, perhaps go somewhere rather glamorous and find out about farming. And true for my new scholar friends over there, my fellow scholars went some amazing places. What was extraordinary an extraordinary number of insurers chose to base themselves in Slough. Please choose your subject carefully, because I could not have got mine more wrong. So anyway, off I went to America, crop insurance. I was really interested in that. Crop insurance has actually been going on since 1938. It was actually Roosevelt trying to win rural votes, basically. It's massive. Look at the stats. 50% of farmers, $114 billion of liability. And they can protect both yield and revenue. But what was interesting is that yield started back in the 1930s. Revenue's only just happened in the last 10, 15 years, but it's already more popular. So I took that to be an interesting point, because actually it was clear that in America, farmers wanted to protect price more than yield. The other fascinating bit about just how bad I am at traveling is I got a chance to learn from State Trooper Weaver about the risks of traveling through Dare County slightly too fast. He bagged me on Independence Day, which gave him an extra thrill to find a Brit in a hire car. So, interesting thing about software is actually sometimes it's easier to build it rather than just research it. I had a background in software. I used to work with Skype and all sorts of different people, and in Chicago. So I decided to do something about it. Risk trading platforms, this is the first thing I learned in my Nuffield, are flaming difficult to simplify. I involved this lady here called Professor Yiling Cheng. She's one of the best mathematicians in the world at Harvard. And what was slightly awkward is that formula that she sent me was the first email in our communication. Now, my mother's here, and up to now, I've always been rather proud of my B in GCSE maths. But I couldn't help feeling I was slightly out of my depth. And of course, we couldn't simplify it. It was very difficult. We needed liquidity, we needed brokers, we needed margin accounts. We got absolutely nowhere. And we talk about a Nuffield aha moment, but I'd like to introduce the concept of a Nuffield nadir. We spent 6 months, 6 developers, 50,000 lines of code trying to simplify a risk management exchange, and it all went in the bin. It was a disaster. I was doing lots of talks to farmers, and they were telling me, it has to be insurance. Don't talk to me about derivatives. Insurance, I understand. Derivatives, I don't. But there's a problem. Insurers have never been interested in price. And the reason is because price is systemic. Incredibly boring word, but actually what it means is that if you insure the milk price and the milk price drops, actually it drops in both Somerset and Suffolk. Now, to an insurer, that brings you out in a mild rash. So we needed to do something to lower the risk for insurers and at the same time protect farmers and lower premiums that farmers might do. We're a bit stuck. Literally, the last roll of the dice was inspired by A.G. Street. We're familiar with that term, up horn, down corn. And the last idea I had was perhaps we could use that sense of the variability in commodities on an annual basis to lower the risk and act like a traditional mixed farmer, but in an insurance sense. And then, oh my goodness, did it get complicated. I had to join up with Liverpool University, Lisbon, 3 professors. We had 12 PhD mathematicians. We built 5 algorithms and ran 60 trillion simulations to try and prove A.G. Street's up horn, down corn, using the very latest data science. And this thing here is Blue Jewel. It's one of the 3rd most powerful computers in Europe, and we got to play with it. And the best thing about that is that it breaks down all the time. And I asked this super clever engineer, wow, what do you do? And he went, we turn it off and on again. So, I won't bore you with too much of the maths, but Blue Jewel enabled us to manage the risk and correlations in extraordinary detail. You can see in the top right-hand side, the variability has now been mapped using decades of AHDB data. We then built algorithms that were incredibly sophisticated because they can now forecast the future price of these commodities and lower the risk, help our understanding as an industry about what's going to happen in the future. And the other set of algorithms basically act like that traditional mixed farmer that we were talking about. They balance the risk capital across all of those individual commodities. And shocking as it was, we actually managed to do it. It was very, very exciting. So, complicated maths, but we needed to make it simple for farmers. And to do that, we asked them just 3 questions. How much do you want to insure, for how long, and what floor price? And the farmers just select the floor price, and if the index price drops, whether it be SPP or the DEFRA Farmgate milk price, if it drops below the floor price the farmer selects, then we replace their income automatically. So finally, we had built this theory. We had our up horn, down corn theory, and we were invited to talk at a conference in Paris, way nicer than Slough. And it was run by Goldman Sachs and SCOR, and we got to present to some of the world's biggest insurers. And actually, they got very excited. Balwar and SCOR got involved, a New York venture capital firm got involved, and government bodies were there, looking at what we'd done to simplify risk management for farmers and reduce the risk to insurers. To build something like this in 2 years has been both research and obviously development. It has been an extraordinary amount of work, and by that I mean an extraordinary amount of help was needed. Over 300 people have helped me do this, led by fellow Nuffield scholars, so I thank you for that. From banks to insurers to the FCA to media companies and hundreds of farmers that have helped me test this along the way. So to conclude, managing production risk, I believe, is now vital. Post-Brexit, we know that there's some pain coming, but that volatility needs to be managed. Good farmers are good risk managers. What I'm not saying is this is a silver bullet. This is not a single solution. Of course, we should focus on productivity before even thinking about price risk management tools. But I hope that over time, this could be useful. And the final thing I'll say is just this level of collaboration fills me with optimism for the future of our industry. It's going to be challenging post-Brexit, of course it is. But the goodwill, the collaboration, our universities, the city even, that goodwill and support, I believe, sets us up very, very well for a very exciting future. Finally, of course, I'd like to thank my sponsor, John Oldacre, and everyone who's helped along the way. My family, friends, my lovely wife who's here. I couldn't have done it without you, and the future is pretty exciting. So thank you.